All right, 14th time is the charm. There you go.
Thanks, Alicia.
Yep.
All right, call me to order at 6:02. Everybody rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Alicia, can you do a roll call, please?
Yep. Steve Degelow,
Here.
Ryan Telshaw,
Here.
Ian McDonald,
Here.
Lori Blargen, here. Bruce Blargen,
Here.
Danny Erickson, here. Matt Kukal.
Here. Together, we engage, educate, and empower all learners, bridging their passions through pathways to create successful futures and positively contribute to our local and global communities. Is there anybody make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Agenda's approved. Public comment, we have one public comment, Bradford Lee. Yep, we have 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you. At your last meeting, you did interviews with candidates, and I was pleased to see that you had a large selection of good candidates. I was really impressed. Yeah, welcome aboard, Ryan. You know, my wife was one of those candidates that didn't get the job, but and she decided to retire and do volunteer reading with the elementary school going forth, so that was good. But there were several questions asked in the interview that I've had thought on. And the first one was the yes/no gender question regarding male biological and the girls' locker room situation. And the first thought I had is, you know, it's never an issue for me. Well, I've gone to several concerts at Somerset Amphitheater this year. And the satellites, you know, it's either red or green. And I just go in and I love the fact that I can take care of one of 2 businesses if I go in there. And I would think that if we were to really look at that question, I know many didn't give you the yes or no answer to that, but the first question I would have to ask too is, what is our usage? Because I think locker rooms in general, and Mr. Blargen, you know, you know, they aren't being used like when I was young. Locker rooms are always good shower areas and all that, but you know, I bet usage changed. I would think that'd be something you'd consider before giving a yes or no answer to something like that. You know, it really comes up to you stand-ups and sit-downs. But the other question regarding deficit, the $154,000 deficit issue, what would you do? Are you going to be referendum prone, or are you going to look at cutting costs? And once again, a complicated question. And it has been clear that enrollment is wanting to go up. I think all you agree. And we had the study on the daycare analysis was foregone. I don't know, is that analysis, would that possibly be public information for entrepreneurs, or because a lot of work went into that? Is that something that because it's good data for someone wishing to get in business, correct?
Yeah, anything be
So-
assigned to the agenda.
Yeah. So, I mean, the daycare, great idea for it. Hopefully it moves forward. Incorporating homeschoolers, I think, into what we're doing here. We got the theater going up. I think if you can make that available to homeschoolers. I was with homeschoolers today at Trollhagen, and I gotta tell you, they seem to pool their money through co-ops and be able to invest in whatever works with their curriculum. And I think what I did notice is that you don't see many junior high and senior highs up there at on the ski program, so they're going somewhere. Is that it?
It's 15 seconds, sir.
15 seconds.
10 seconds.
Okay, that's it. Anything we can do to raise excitement for the school district. I'll like to attend the listening session next week with a possible idea. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. Next item, Superintendent Report. Shannon.
Yep, a couple things tonight. So you can take a look at any referendum invoices if interested. Those are attached as always. So there was a question brought up regarding potentially bringing in Baker Tilly to come and do a presentation for the board. So our audit for last year is now finished and complete. You can find all of those results of the audit on our website. But there was a question that came up of, might there be an interest by the board to have Baker Tilly come in, go over the audit, maybe just give a big overview of what they do, how they do it, if there's any interest there. If you want to talk about it, great, but I wanted to at least put it on the table. That's something, since I've been here, we haven't done, but it might be good information if interested, to at least have them come in and you can put some names and faces with the company that we pay a lot of money to do some pretty big work. And so might it be helpful to have them come in and give an overview of the audit and again, other things that they do as well as a part of that audit. So I want to put it on the table. They are more than willing. They do that for lots of districts. It's not unique by any means. It's never really been asked by the board before, so it got brought up. So I want to bring it to the table and just kind of see any thoughts that you guys have, if that's something you want me to continue to pursue.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, please.
Yes, please, for me.
Good.
They did come in many years ago, they did come in and do a presentation. And after a few years of hearing the same thing over and over again, that's
Sure.
kind of why it got dropped. But there's so many, that was a long time ago, so it would probably be beneficial to do it again.
I think we'd all have some good questions to ask.
So
Okay.
you'll look at some dates and then put it on one of our.
Yeah, I'll think, I'll start by reaching out to them. I have no idea their availability, if it's something we have to plan out months ahead of time, or if they can say, hey, give me the date and we'll show up. So I'll maybe start with that. I can bring it back to the next meeting, and kind of finalize it then too.
Okay.
But like I said, if, interested now, or even the public that's listening, if you go on our website, you can find the results of that audit there. There are certainly some complex parts to it, which I think is helpful to have Baker Tilly come in and kind of walk through it and go through it. But if you're interested, all that is on the website too, so. Okay, so I'm hearing yes.
Yep.
Pursue that forward, okay. All right, so letter C here, every January, every school district is required by the state of Wisconsin to bring forward a chart very similar to the one that we have attached here regarding open enrollment space for the following school year. So this becomes frankly a bigger deal if you are a district that closes your open enrollment. We do not and don't plan to do that, specifically for students not supported by an IEP. Jessie is going to speak to the one component of open enrollment that we likely will be closing. She'll talk to that in just a second. But basically what we do is we take current enrollment as of right now, roll all the numbers up. You'll see that we don't have JK listed here because JK is not required, so we don't infuse it into our numbers. And we take a look and then do some math and kind of figure out, do we have space? We certainly do have space, so we won't be closing open enrollment for students not supported by an IEP. I'm going to have Jessie speak to kind of the second component, which frankly ends up being the bigger component for our district, since we don't close open enrollment kind of in the top part there, but she's going to talk about open enrollment for students supported by an IEP.
Yeah, absolutely. So Alicia's gonna pull up a lot of information that goes into kind of the planning and programming for students that are supported by an IEP and why it becomes such a complicated process. So really when we're looking at setting those spaces, the state does not set a certain kind of threshold for minimum or maximum caseloads for each building and different kind of disabilities, because it can be so unique for every single district. So we kind of look at it as a two-pronged approach. The first approach, if you want to scroll down a little bit, Alicia, is looking at the planning guidelines. So this, again, there's lots of factors that go into the different special education planning. number one, kind of looking at just federal and state special ed laws, right? So making sure that we're in compliance with all of those laws. Like I said, DPI doesn't put out specific numbers that we can base it on, but it does give guidance, so we kind of review all of those pieces. They put out different due process hearings and state complaint decisions, so I review those. The kind of hot ticket item for the last few years is looking at students that are on a modified day. So looking at our students in Somerset, how many students we have on a modified day, we want to avoid any type of due process complaints, so making sure that we are providing the services like we're supposed to, so taking all of those factors into consideration, looking at state licensing requirements, looking at the continuum of services, right? So you look at students that might be completely supported just in general education, so they don't have to come out, all the way to students that might have more, like even a self-contained classroom, right? They're not able to, because of their disability, go into the general education setting. Few and far between, but we have to kind of look at everything that falls in between there as well for what we are providing for those services. We look at what our special ed staffing allotment is. So in each building, what our FTE is. We look at, like I said, this is where it becomes a little bit more complicated because we look at the population of students that are in front of us today. 15 years ago, that population might look very different depending on who moves into our district, right? We have to provide those services no matter what. So if a student moves in with a vision impairment, we have to provide those services. So it's going to vary depending on the year, depending on the time of year, and what services we have to provide for our resident districts. All of that kind of gets put into play. We look at our buildings, for each of our 3 buildings, the spaces that we're able to provide, what our total enrollment is, looking at the enrollment projections, and then, like I said, that continuum of services for how we can provide that in the least restrictive environment, right? So how we can provide how we can get students access to that general education in the least restrictive environment. So that's the first prong of the approach, all of the planning that goes into the services that we deliver. The second is looking at the caseload ratio guidelines. So these aren't fixed numbers. This isn't, but based on kind of all of the things I said above, this is where we want to see our caseloads at. So you can see, like at the elementary, we don't specifically say like one case manager is going to only service students with autism because we don't have enough students in all of those disability areas. So we do kind of clump them together in more of that cross-categorical, but we try to provide the services. A case manager might specialize more in like the reading, but they might have other students that have like other health impairments as well. So I just kind of broke it down for what we would like to remain under in each of those areas, if that makes sense. So one special education teacher that might service autism, a significant developmental delay, and early childhood, 1 teacher, 2 support staff, and a max of 10 students on that caseload. Now, we can't factor in, if students move into our district, that's why it's a guideline, because we could go over that as well. So we always have to kind of look at, it's ever changing. It's ebbing and flowing throughout the year. But this is what we want to set, where we want it to be at and not to go over. So we look at the planning guidelines, and then we kind of set these caseload ratio guidelines, and then determine, do we have some spaces available. Another component of that, so like Shannon said, we're rolling up the classes for each year. So I kind of roll up our spreadsheet, look at the middle school, where are students falling, how many students on each caseload, kind of shuffle them around. We also take into account how many initial evaluations we have going on. So currently, right now at elementary, right, that's going to be where the bulk of our initial evaluations come from. We take that into account. We look at kind of where we are now, historically, where we've been for the last few years with evaluations. So we can plan to say, right now at our elementary next year, we might be lower for caseloads, but we have to build into the fact that we know there's probably going to be at least 20 to 30 students that will qualify for an IEP as well. So we take all of that into account. And based on that, like Shannon said, right now for all 3 of the buildings, we're going to be closed for those specific services for if students apply for that open enrollment. It's a lot of information. Are there any questions or things that I can explain a little bit more in depth? I would also just say for services that we contract out for, so being a kind of a smaller district, like deaf, hard of hearing, or audiology, physical therapy, if we didn't have any students that were not attending here, it's a contracted service, so if they came and applied for open enrollment, we would say we don't have those services since we have to contract out for them. We don't provide them if we didn't have students in our district requiring them.
Resident students,
Yep.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Questions?
Thanks, Jesse.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
So this will come back at the next meeting. If you think of any questions between now and the next meeting, either shoot Jesse or I an email, but for now, that's gonna be the plan. Okay. Okay, I have two more things. So the next one is a pretty simple memo outlining our recommendation for summer school dates for this year. This will be the last year that we do it this way because my next agenda item talks about our calendar recommendation for next school year, and I have the summer school dates already on there, so we won't have to do it separately. Not sure why we've always done it this way, but this is the way we'll do it for now, and then we'll fix it moving forward. So moving forward for this coming school year, 2025, this summer, very similar to what we did last year, 5 weeks of summer school for 5 days per week. We feel like over the course of time, since we've shifted to this model, the 5 weeks seem to work a little bit better than the 6 weeks. By week 6, we see our attendance start to drop a little bit. Kids and families seem a little bit more engaged, and then it also allows our staff who are working summer school to get a little bit more of a break between working summer school and having to come back, for some of them within 2 weeks or so, depending on if they have certain roles in the district. So this is our recommendation. Summer school planning is already underway. We have a new coordinator this year, Lindsay Thomas. So she's working and moving and grooving on some things, but wanted to bring this forward in terms of our recommendation for this year. So this will also come back to the next meeting for formal approval. Again, if you have questions, shoot me an email. Hearing none, I'm going to move on to my final agenda item, which is bringing forward our recommendation for 25-26 school calendar. So as you remember, multiple meetings ago, I had talked about, we put out a survey to families and parents. Got lots of feedback from staff and in the buildings. And then when you put all of that together with some of the non-negotiables that exist within creating a calendar, such as when holidays fall, looking at the contract days for certified staff, the number of days that we aim for students to ensure that we hit our required number of hours for instruction, state assessments, when those things fall. There ends up being, not quite as much flexibility as some people think at times when creating the schedule, but we feel putting all of that together, we feel really good about the draft that we're bringing forward. So I'm going to highlight a couple things, and then certainly I can take any questions that you have. So starting with August, the first thing that we did is move our open house. Typically it's been, for this draft, it would be the week of the 18th through the 21st. Typically it's been on that Wednesday night, and we moved it to Thursday. That was something that staff has been asking about because that Wednesday becomes a really long day for staff. So we really wanted to focus on those first 3 days with our professional development, coming back, getting rooms and things ready, and then kind of ending the week with our open house, and then moving into that next day being a day off for staff. That next week then is when we bring students back. So a lot of feedback from parents about the staggered start, so we altered that because we still feel really strongly the benefits that we've seen with those major transitions for our JK and kindergartners, our 5th graders entering middle school, our 9th graders and new students coming to high school. There are some really powerful things that happen on those days that we think then set those students up for some success. So that would happen on the 26th, and then all students would report on the 27th and 28th. No school the 29th, obviously moving into the next week, Labor Day, and then our first official day is the 2nd. I'm going to move us down here just for a second to December. So again, looking at the way that the holidays fell and lots of feedback from parents regarding liking the idea of having 2 full weeks over Christmas. So starting on December 22nd and 23rd, there would be no students. So students would be off essentially from the 19th and then come back January 5th. But you can see I've got 3 days there that are pink because staff would need to work 2 of those 3 days. So they would either choose to work December 22, 23, and or January 2. They wouldn't have to work all 3 days, just 2 of those days. And then as an admin team, we would outline the structure and the expectations for those days. Probably very similar to what we just set up last Friday with our flexible professional development day. There would be expectations, there would be evidence and reproducibles and things that staff would need to provide, keeping it somewhat formal, but also allowing a little bit of that flexibility depending on maybe what might work better for staff depending on how they choose to work those days. So if you move over to the right-hand side, we also, I'm going to move us to March. So lots of feedback from parents about spring break. Overwhelmingly wanting to keep 5 days of spring break, but wanting us to move it earlier in the month if possible. So we moved it up this year, next year in the proposal, that week of March 9th. So our ACT for our high schoolers next year would be March 24th. So coming off of spring break, we would have that next week to kind of dial in some of the final preparations for ACT. And then from March 24th and then 2 weeks beyond that, there are still windows for accommodations for students with IEPs to complete the ACT. And then it moves right into assessment season for the other 2 buildings with the Wisconsin Forward exam, etc. So then, all of that together would put us at our last student day being June 3rd. Staff would then still come on June 4th and half of the 5th. Some good feedback there to be able to have some time to be able to kind of close out rooms. Staff that are preparing for summer school have a little bit extra time to do that as well, because you can see we're recommending that we start summer school that following Monday. Also try to do a little bit more of a mix for our professional learning days between Mondays and Fridays. Parent feedback on that was split, just like it was a couple years ago the last time we asked parents about, do you prefer Mondays or Fridays? And no real strong direction one way or the other, so we decided to mix it up a little bit to try to meet everybody's needs the best that we could. Still try to tag on some professional development days to the end of a break. That's something that staff have really appreciated. It's reduced the amount of added hours that they have to prep on holiday breaks and things like that, so they can come back and we have a bit of a soft start, very similar to what we did last week on Thursday and Friday. So all of that together needs to equal 185.5 certified staff teacher days and 169 student days, which allows us 2, I would say, wiggle room snow days, just like we have this year, where we have 2 days where if we had inclement weather, we wouldn't have to worry about virtual learning or making it up. But on that 3rd day, then we would have to think about how we gain back those hours. So right now, our plan would be virtual learning, not extremely ideal, but right now we have 2 days built in, and that would be the recommendation for here too. So the state of Wisconsin does not require a certain number of student days, but it requires a certain number of student instructional hours. So 169, again, puts us just over with 2 days of wiggle room kind of built in. So it's a lot, but I'm happy to answer questions and get some feedback.
I got a couple questions.
Yeah.
Can you, I know I've typed this in the past, but can you explain, so August student
Yeah.
is 0. Why do the students report on 27, 28, but it's not the official first day till September 2nd?
Yep, so the state of Wisconsin, you can't officially start school until after Labor Day. So districts that have kids report before that, technically these count as summer school days, which is summer school revenue. So if you had a child that you decided not to send any of those days, you're not penalized, it doesn't count for your attendance. And It really is to kind of kickstart the school year, getting some routines down, getting kids back into the building. And from a district perspective, those are 3 days that we can still count as summer school, and they count as summer school revenue.
So is it revenue based on the number of heads that are in the building?
Yes,
On those days?
number of students that walk through your door and sit in your seats.
On those days, okay.
Yep.
And then on the 26th,
Yep.
any thoughts on a half day? Is that a full day? Like, what do you do with these kids?
It's
You
a
know,
full day.
Full, okay.
Yep, so, like JK in kindergarten, basically they start to run them through all of the ins and outs of what that looks like to be in school, right? 5th grade, they go through all the rules and routines of what does it now look like to be a middle schooler. Very similar for 9th graders, class meetings, running through lockers, running through how do you walk through the lunch line, I mean, those kinds of things. Mhm.
Anybody else has a feel free. I do have one, but I forgot what it was. I gotta find it.
Okay, because I had a question about the 5th through the 7th at the beginning of August. In the note, it says all new staff and mentors, and then in parentheses, it says August 5th only, or at least, that's what I think it says, 8/5. What's that about?
So the mentors are only coming on the
August
5th.
And the new staff
Yep,
are
I
all-
had to like literally say it out loud, yes. The mentors are only there on the 5th, new staff are there 5, 6, 7.
Got it.
Yep.
I don't know, it was graduation. So can
Yep.
you just talk real quick? Why do we do graduation so early before the end of the year? And how does that impact educational hours? Like, obviously they meet that requirement.
Yep.
How does that work?
Yep. So early in the year, so I would say it is, fairly comparable to districts around us. To graduate your seniors ahead of basically the rest of your student body. This is just kind of typically when it's been done in Somerset. Over the course of the years, I remember, and Laura, you can probably speak to this better than I can, but they tried doing it on a Friday once or twice, and that didn't go over too well with parents. So it's remained on a Sunday. The idea is, if you look at the next weekend, having it during Memorial Day weekend, not ideal. And then, the following week then, now you're kind of moving into that last week of school, and it's just been kind of I don't know a better answer other than kind of the way that we've just done it, is get the seniors in, get them graduated, now they're moved out of the building. The last 2 weeks we can focus on closing up the rest of the building, finals, all those kinds of things that have already been wrapped up for our seniors by the 15th.
So in the past, there were, primarily at the high school level, because some of those classes are a mix of not just seniors. And having the seniors take a final with, what you're looking at, 1, 2, nearly 3 weeks of school. So there were some teachers at the high school who objected to losing that much instructional time, and graduation was closer to the end of the school year.
Yeah, so like those mixed classes still exist? A senior and juniors?
Some-
So is there instructional time that happens then?
Yep, so my best explanation would be that, as seniors are finishing out the course, because they're there until the 15th, right? So that's the last senior day, and then they graduate a couple days later. So the idea of like those last 2 weeks in particular, the idea of what a final looks very different now than it did probably 10 years ago, right? It's not necessarily a big multiple choice test, it's application, it's those kinds of things. So the seniors, I would say, still engage in that, but then teachers those next 2 weeks take those projects to basically like another level, right? So there's a lot of things, especially, I wouldn't even hardly count June 2nd, 1st, only because, you've got community day in there, you've got a variety of things that are happening with turning in textbooks, turning in Chromebooks, that starts happening June 1 and 2. So now you've got kind of the week of the 18th and the week of the 25th, where you are finishing up any other requirements for those classes in terms of, right, again, finals, projects, assessments, those kinds of things. Mhm.
Thank you.
Yep. Well, if you have questions or you hear feedback, I mean, this is obviously attached to the agenda, so I welcome people to email me as well if they have questions or additional feedback. Then it will come back again at the next meeting for official approval.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks Shannon. Next item on the agenda is the WBY, or 2025 WBY Resolutions and Delegate. So the first item was there are, we have to select a delegate, so obviously Danny and Lori are going to this. Week of the 20th. Right after our next meeting, so we'll come back and vote for one of them to be the delegate for the 12 resolutions, so they would sit in and then vote, and that's, Lori and I were talking a little before the meeting just about that, how that works. You were a delegate before, is that right?
Yep.
So you sit in and you vote on these resolutions for, I guess, speaking for the school board of Somerset.
Yeah, so it's important that we go through the resolutions and communicate to whoever the delegate is, how we as a board want them to vote. And these resolutions are not necessarily supported by the organization of WBY. And one in particular that I'd like to draw your attention to is resolution number 4, which is decoupling public and private school funding. Just a few days ago, Shannon forwarded us an article about school funding, and this resolution, number 4, does nothing to address the inequities that public schools face in funding, starting with funding of special education, but also including the lack of keeping up with inflation. And lastly, that it was based on what the school district's per pupil funding was in 1993 and 94. So if your school funding in 1993-94 was on the lower side because you were trying to be fiscally responsible, you have been locked into that for nearly 35 years, over 30 years. Because of the revenue caps, that's what the revenue caps were set on. So it's not possible to talk about shifting a significant component of funding for a public school without addressing these fundamental issues about how public education is funded in Wisconsin. So currently, and Dave has talked with us about this in the past when he's gone over the budget, currently, the per pupil amount that is paid to private voucher schools is funded by a reduction in our funding. So in our school district, if we have 10 kids who opt into this voucher program, that funding that goes to those private schools is taken from us. But now, the way the law is right now, we can go over the revenue cap by however much that amount of money was. And if we support this resolution, that is taking away our ability to make up that funding as a public school.
How do we make up that funding?
Right now, the per pupil amount paid to a private voucher school is funded by a reduction in our state aid from the public school district that the student would otherwise attend. To make up for that reduction, we are able to count the students participating in the choice program, and we can receive a non-recurring revenue limit adjustment. So we end up not losing that money, but instead of getting it from the state, we're getting it from the property taxpayers.
Comes from the taxpayers.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
But it doesn't hurt us, But if we decouple like this, then we have no way of making up those funds. So, this resolution eliminates the possibility of us making up to recoup the funding lost by having students attend or leave our public schools, attend a private choice school or leave a public school. The first school voucher program in Wisconsin started in Milwaukee in 1990. And since then, it has spread across the state. And in the 26-27 school year, all the number limits on how many students can participate in the school voucher program are gone. In all of this time, in 35 years, there has been research done by third parties. Not a single bit of evidence exists that school voucher programs result in any improvement of academic results over public schools. And it's costing over $700 million to the taxpayers of Wisconsin. In my opinion, the entire school voucher program should be eliminated as unconstitutional. The Wisconsin Constitution requires that property tax revenue be used to support and maintain common schools in each school district. This decoupling resolution, in my opinion, is simply a ploy to continue funding two separate school systems, but now the private school voucher program, the school choice program, would be getting their funds from the general state fund rather than property taxes, which could result in creating a situation in which public schools can be funded at a lesser rate than private schools. Much like what happened in the South when the Supreme Court ruled on Brown versus the Board of Education. So I strongly recommend voting no on this resolution.
What teeth do these resolutions even have? Because some school districts in Wisconsin aren't even part of WASB.
Right. So WASB has lobbyists that work with the legislature and bring forward to legislators the consensus of many of the school districts who do belong to WASB. And I don't know what the percentage is, but it's quite high. Most schools do belong to WASB.
So these are given the lobbyist direction on.
Yes, and it states the official position of the Wisconsin Association of School Boards.
Do you have an alternative to
Yeah.
this that did you feel would be a better recommendation?
No, to vote no.
Oh, well, yes, but I mean, that, other than the voucher system itself, I mean, like,
You mean, how would I recommend
Yeah.
public education be funded?
just strictly through the school. Yeah.
Well, I would eliminate the voucher, the school choice program. That would save us, that would provide $700 million more dollars. And when we look at where our budget is, and it's not just us, it's not just Somerset, it's schools across the entire state for sure, and maybe probably more states than just Wisconsin.
Laura, you mentioned statistics on the voucher schools' performance
Yeah,
in academics.
yes,
Do we have those somewhere that we can look at?
sure.
Okay. If you can email them to us, maybe.
I can email you a couple, but you can do plenty of research on it.
Right, well, I just thought maybe you'd have them at your fingertips. So,
Any other resolutions that anybody has, any thoughts on, or if anybody hasn't looked at them, or, we have the next 2 weeks to kind of dig in. And then we'll vote for these at the next meeting, if anybody has any other thoughts now.
So we'll research these, we'll come back in 2 weeks, we will vote to set a position of the board.
Yep,
The two of you are both going to the convention,
Only one of us needs to.
and so then one of you.
and we'll, so in 2 weeks, we'll designate who the delegate is to.
Yep.
Okay.
The only other one that you might want to take a look at is Resolution 2. It's the pathway to licensure for paraprofessionals. In my opinion, all the other ones were fine. Resolution 2 has to do with providing an alternate method for people to become teachers without going through a university system and getting their degree in education and their licensure as a public or as a teacher. You know, right now, because of the difficulty in finding teachers in certain areas, I don't know how long ago, it's been a few years, that if a person has a bachelor's degree in any area, they can get a teaching license to teach in Wisconsin. This is providing an alternative method for paraprofessionals, our support staff. And I'm not necessarily opposed to it because we have paraprofessionals who've been in our district for many, many years and who are very good at their jobs and might have the potential of doing a good job as a teacher. And I don't know that they would be less qualified than someone who's never taught, never been in a school except for when they were a student, and has a bachelor's degree in dance, for example.
There wasn't much background on this. When I looked at this too, it just didn't really say how this occurs. It just said alternative pathways, so maybe is it like a to me, it wasn't clear on what they were asking. Like, I get what they're trying to do, and I thought the same thing. We already talked about this, approving this. I think we approved, or this was a resolution had been in the last couple of years, because about anybody with that degree being approved to teach, but then I was wondering, it doesn't really say how, it just gave, I guess, a rationale, but it didn't really.
My understanding for this method, someone who doesn't have a bachelor's degree, like someone who was a paraprofessional and wanted to try being a special education teacher, they would have to have the endorsement of the school in which they are currently working. And I believe that their license would only be good for that particular school district, not anywhere in the state. Jesse, do you want to speak to this?
I'm not sure, but that
Okay.
sounds, I can't speak
I don't-
specifically, but I don't think it would be for like other districts.
Maybe you can look into it the next couple weeks, try to figure out more. That was the only thing that kind of set me out. It didn't explain how this would happen. It didn't say like how many years there had to be a paraprofessional really. It was just you're paraprofessional now, and you can be, there's a pathway to be a teacher, so I didn't know how that was gonna happen. Any other questions from anybody on those? Okay, so they'll come back to the next meeting to vote on them, and then vote on our delegate, either Danny or Lori. All right, onto the consent agenda. Is there anybody who want to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the personnel, did I miss any? Consent agenda? The personnel update, the athletics activities personnel update, and the donations as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Well, I'd like to thank the 8 businesses and individuals who contributed over $28,000 to the football stadium honor plaza. There were 2 of these donations on our last meeting as well that came to a total of $16,000. So, you know, a lot of money so far, and from what I understand, there has been much more donated. I'd like to extend my appreciation to Brad Nemec and all the work that he has done on this, going around and personally speaking to people about donating to this and collecting the money, as well as former graduates who contributed to the football stadium honor plaza. Joe Carafel, who did all the electrical work. He's donating his time. The school district just is paying the expenses. Al Whitstock, Halverson Concrete, John Melvin, who supplied concrete and did all the work to pour the concrete, and Neil Plord, who provided the markers at cost. And Mr. Nemec specifically mentioned Bruce, who he called the brains and muscle of the operation. He said that you laid everything out, you staked it out, you were there doing a lot of the manual labor. And I just would like to thank everybody in our community who has contributed to this. And I believe there will be many more. My understanding is that they've raised all the money needed to pay for the entire thing. They did it for about $100,000 less than what Market and Johnson bid it out as. And thank you. Thank you for your generosity.
I'll probably do, I think they're gonna do something in the fall, I think it's the plan.
For a formal dedication.
Yeah, for the name and everybody donated. Yep. Other discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes, 7-0. Item for approval, number 8, overnight travel trip, or travel request for the Somerset cheer to go down to Orlando. Anybody make a motion for that one?
I'll make a motion to approve it, that memo as presented on the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, motion approved, 7-0. General information, our next meeting will be January 20th. We'll have a listening session 30 minutes prior. The board members, by the Wednesday, all of us for the Wednesday prior to that meeting, Wednesday or Thursday, try to sign up for that listening session if you're able to make it or want to attend. Then that'll be posted to the agenda on Friday when it's sent out of what board members will be at that listening session. And it's up to 3 board members at that listening session. The other item is school board candidates to file candidacy paperwork. The paperwork for the spring election is due, for school board members, is due tomorrow, January 7th at 5 p.m. Please bring it to the district office before 5 o'clock if you plan on running for the spring election, or spring school board election. Yeah, and see, or reach out to Alicia if you still need any of that information tomorrow. All right, we'll do it once around. Matt, I will start with you.
I have nothing tonight.
All right. Ian.
I just welcome everybody back from their holidays. Hope they had a great New Year's.
Steve.
Nothing.
Ryan.
Nothing to add tonight.
Lori.
I'm good, thank you.
I'll just note that the winter sports, winter athletics are all underway. I think right before break there was a home wrestling meet. Last Friday there was hockey, basketball. Both basketball teams were playing. Wrestling was for the weekend, so there's lots of events happening. There's a lot of stuff going on this week. So get out and support those students. best you can. Dan?
Thank you for all the donations, just echoing what Lori said earlier. Thank you very much.
Can I just add? Scholarship applications are due February 1st. If your child who is a senior hasn't filled one out yet, you might want to encourage them to do so.
Yes, good deal. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thank you, meeting adjourned at 6:53. Thanks, everybody.